Guys, today's episode is going to be a little bit different, and I'm not going to start with my usual "What's up, guys?" as I normally do, because just a little over an hour ago, I learned that my former personal assistant, Mia, has died. And it's just happened in the last couple of days. And I got a message from her brother just to reach out to him. And so I did that. And he told me the very, very sad news. And so I'm a little bit in shock here. And I thought I have to get an episode out. Why don't I just talk about my working relationship with Mia and all of the kind of the stuff that we went through. And so I'm kind of dedicating this episode to her, but it's not just me kind of like going on about a person that I used to work with. I'm hoping to make this both valuable to you as the listener and also worthy of dedicating to her, just in her memory, because she was very much instrumental in the success that I enjoyed in the early days. When I started working with Mia, it's about 21 years ago now, and just over 21 years ago. And so I thought what I'll do is share some of the stories and some of the insights that just on reflecting about her and all of the kind of time that we spent together. I thought there's some valuable insights there that you guys will take something away from. So first of all, let's go back to the early days. Like, I built up this big portfolio, and the big portfolio did not start out as a big portfolio. It started out as a tiny little portfolio. And I was running around like a headless chicken trying to create this business. And Mia was my first employee, and I hired her around about the age of 32. I think I was 32 or 33. And the time exactly, I've actually been going over my old emails, and I can see the job offer that I sent to her, and it was in February of 2004. So that was just a couple of months, like 5 months before my daughter, my firstborn child, Amber, came into this world. And Amber turned 21 in July. So I know, based on that it's coming up on 22 years since I hired Mia. And what's interesting about it is, before hiring her, I was doing everything myself. I was really running the business by the seat of my pants. And I can remember coming home. I was living in Clonskea at the time, and I would come home and I would sit on the kitchen counter, and I would speak to my wife, and then I would open up the laptop. I had a small little Sony Vaio, I think it was called back then. And I would pop it open, and I would just sit there for a couple of hours just grinding out the emails and responding to all of the emails that had come in that day, just trying to kind of keep the momentum going. And I can remember thinking to myself, I shouldn't be working this much. I probably could do with having an assistant to carry the load. But I was quite reluctant to hire anybody because I'd had a bad experience. I had started my architectural firm, and I had started that in 1999. And by 2001, so about 2 years after starting it, I had 3 employees. And I can remember having to lay them off because I just couldn't get the work. I couldn't drive enough business in to pay the fees, to keep them all paid and stuff like that. And so I remember shutting down that business around about 2001 and just deciding that I'm going to go and I'm going to reinvent myself as a project manager and development manager specifically. And then I'm going to go into property. And I've shared the story before about the site in the west of Ireland and stuff. That was the catalyst. But once I decided I was going to go all in on property, I had to actually unwind the business. And so that was quite a painful experience. You've got people working with you, and you have to let them go, and you have to kind of send them off, into difficult times themselves. And so I can remember saying, I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to hire people and then be forced to kind of be in a position where I have to let them go. And so I was reluctant at the idea of hiring anybody. And I debated for quite a while with myself on whether I really needed somebody or whether I just wasn't working hard enough, and that I could keep on grinding it out myself, sitting in front of the computer, doing all that kind of stuff. And as well as that, I wouldn't have the expense of a salary, the money that I'd be paying out on a salary. It's never just a salary, by the way. Like at the time of, obviously nowadays we're used to the work from home and the remote working and stuff. But back then, when I was thinking about hiring Mia, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to have to get an office. I'm going to have to furnish the office. There was no WeWork or any of that kind of stuff back then. Furnish the office, buy her a computer, probably buy a copier and a fax machine, and rent an office and have her salary and all of this kind of stuff. And I can remember just doing the maths and sort of saying, am I making enough to justify this expense? And so I slowly but surely came around to the idea. I was working on a couple of projects and it did seem to be going in the right direction. So I decided, okay, I asked one of these recruitment people to go and find a candidate that was extremely efficient and very, very organized. And the idea here was I'd gone through that sort of period of time where you're chasing after business and stuff like that, but then always the admin stuff builds up and you end up spending the weekend doing things like VAT returns and accounts and filing and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember thinking to myself, if I could just focus on the business stuff that is bringing in money, and I could have somebody that could do all of the admin and take the kind of the minutiae and the minutiae off my hands and give somebody that role to just look after everything else, and I'll just focus on the money-making activities. So reluctantly decided, okay, let's give this a go and let's see if it works. And so I hired Mia and she came in and took over. And what was just great about her was one of the things that really is super helpful about having a very, very capable assistant, whether you call it a personal assistant or an executive assistant, it's much, much more than a secretary. It's somebody that just basically takes everything over and looks after it for you. And so what I remember doing is saying, listen, I don't have an office yet. And she was like, that's fine. I'll organize the office. And so she went off viewing properties and coming back with a list for me to go and say, right, here's the short list. Let's have a look at these 2 or 3 and decide. And we went and had a look at one. And I said, what do you think, Mia? And she was like, this is good. This will work. And so we took that place. It was on Fitzwilliam Place. I think, if I remember correctly, it was 35 Fitzwilliam Place. And it was just one small room. It was kind of a room with files and then a room with a window. And anyway, soon after hiring her, I just thought to myself, whoa, why didn't I make this decision ages ago? Like, this was just a great move, because suddenly my weekends were freed up. And when you have more free time, your energy comes back. You have more energy and more creative kind of capacity. And so suddenly ideas come quicker, problem solving is easier, all of that kind of stuff. So I suddenly realized, whoa, this is a night and day difference. I should have done this much sooner. And it's funny, actually, I've read that book by Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. And he talks about the time to hire somebody and just to get that admin stuff off your desk, because that is really eating into your time. Anyway, the next thing that I found super valuable about Mia, and it's funny, I can't believe I'm talking about her in the past tense. It's really quite painful. Mia had this incredible ability to anticipate my needs. So she had direct access to my email, and she could send emails on my behalf and all that kind of stuff through Outlook. And so she'd be monitoring my email, and she would see an email coming in from a solicitor or from somebody, and she would read it. And if she thought it was very urgent, she'd text me and say, there's an email from such and such there, you should read it. But also she would know that when I read that, my reaction is probably going to be X, Y, and Z. And she would anticipate that, and she would have done the work before I even asked. So she would know that Gavin's going to need to see such and such a report when he sees that. And so she would wait for me to read that email, and then I'd see it, and then I'd get on to her and I'd say, listen, I'm going to need this and this. And she would say, here you go. I thought you would say that. And I can remember thinking, God, this girl has got telepathy. what is going on here? And it was just, that is really what separates a kind of a standard enough secretary from somebody who is a really excellent personal or executive assistant. They just, the ability to just step into your life and just take over all that stuff. And a lot of the time what they do, I didn't do this now, but I have heard of some examples where the personal assistant will actually take the phone from the person and give them a new phone number and just basically say, I'm taking this phone on you now. So all of the texts and all of the WhatsApps and stuff will come into that old phone, and you have this new clean phone where you're not getting interrupted by anybody. So about a year and a half after hiring Mia, I remember it was coming up to my wife's birthday, my wife's 30th birthday. And so I wanted to do a surprise birthday party. But at the time I was running around like a headless chicken, trying to pull all these deals together. The best description, it's like the metaphor of spinning plates. You know, you've got these 7 or 8 sticks with a plate on top spinning. And as you do this, you know, you're spinning one. When you get to the end of the line, you look back and the first line is actually about to wobble and fall off. So you're running back and forth. And that's what it's like running a business when you're at the start. And so I remember saying, listen, I need to do something for my wife. Will you take over this task? And so she did. She went out. She identified the venue, the guest list. I even gave her all of the numbers. I would sneak into my wife's mobile phone and I would look through it and I'd find the names of all of her close friends and I'd get the number of them. And then I would give them to Mia and I would say, will you reach out and contact them and say that here's the date that the party is on and here, you know, it's a surprise and don't let on and all that kind of stuff. She handled all of that. And sure enough, on the big day, I brought my wife at the time to this. We went and we did it in the Guinness Storehouse. And it all went without a hitch. I mean, it was an amazing evening and all organized. I didn't have a hand in the organization at all. Now, something that comes to mind when I think about all of this is just the importance of clarity. And I've been reflecting on this just here. And I realize now that those first couple of years when I was working with Mia, it was just me and her in that tiny little office that we found. Like literally, I think the rent was maybe $500 a month or something like that. And it was those couple of years that were by far the most profitable. And I cleared millions in profit in that period of time. And it was just me and Mia working alone together. And I can remember I had so much freedom and so much simplicity in my life. I used to go off on 2 or 3 or even 4 ski trips a year. And because I had just so much freedom when she came in and took over all of that stuff. So I could be away, something would come in urgently needing my attention. She would see it. She would get on to me, how will we deal with this? And it would be something like, fax it to the hotel that I'm in and I'll sign it and I'll send it back. And that would be it. Like the whole thing would be managed. And so I stopped thinking about, I need to be around. And I just started traveling and stuff like that. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the time, your ego starts to make decisions and you haven't properly reflected on it. And this is something that I talk about a lot, but it's just reflecting on my time with Mia that I realize the importance of it. It's incredible. And I was there with this incredible amount of freedom, making these hugely profitable business deals. I had this really, really successful business with a huge cash flow coming through. And my ego got it into its head, like 2 separate people almost. What I was doing and what I was enjoying and living my best life. And then over here, my ego was saying, hey, this is not enough. You need to do much bigger. You need to go for a much, much bigger thing. And so I started thinking, I want to have a huge business. I want it to be international in scope. I want to have a big, big team of all these minions that are all running around doing all of this stuff in purely ego-based decision-making. Nothing to do with clarity. Because if I had sat down and taken the time to think, what do I actually want? I would have known right there and then that I just want more of what I have right now. I want this freedom, being able to go away, making a lot of money, but not having the complication of a big organization around me. And sure enough, small, nimble, and simple is really beautiful. And that's the way I should have kept it. But instead, I expanded and I got bigger and bigger and bigger. I started doing much bigger deals. I started taking much riskier projects on. And I went down to Spain. And when I was in Spain, I took on that huge project in Spain. And by the time 2007 came along, I was spinning so many plates. It was all about to collapse. But the worst thing was that as I hired more and more people into the organization, and there was too many people there. And what happens when you hire, like the first person you hire is the most important person, and you've got to get that one right. And I got that one absolutely spot on with Mia. But as I got bigger, as I wanted to get bigger, I started paying less attention to the people I was hiring. And what happened was internal conflict and friction started to build up inside the office. And so I can remember all of the friction. I was traveling all the time. I was gone from the office. When I was gone, there was the people in the office, there was a bit of friction building up between them, I think. And I think Mia saw the writing on the wall that, this whole thing was going to come crashing down. And so in October 2006, just 2 years and 8 months, like it's amazing how such a short period of time, Mia had such a great impact on my business and on my life and stuff. But in that period of time, she actually sent me an email and she just said, Gavin, I'm really, really sorry, but I can't do this anymore. It's very stressful now working here and all of this kind of stuff. And she just basically said, I'm going to have to leave. And so that was it. She left. And I can remember really sort of thinking to myself, I can't let this girl leave. But too much had happened. And so she left. And I can remember there was just 2 moments between, I used to reflect on the business before she left and the business after she left. And what's really crazy is just how much you realize somebody does after they're gone. Now, this is something that I've been reflecting on just this past week here in Ireland. This week, because my wife went home to Moldova to visit her family. It was her sister's birthday. And so she was gone for about a week. And so it was just me taking care of the kids for the past week. And it's amazing when somebody's away for a couple of days, you suddenly realize, whoa, this is what they do. That's normally just seems like automatic. And it was like that with me. Like everything suddenly started to kind of grind. Like it felt like there was salt or sand in the gears. And things started to slow down. Things started to kind of back up. Suddenly rent collection in my portfolio wasn't being done properly, wasn't being monitored. Somebody stopped paying the rent and nobody noticed this. And all of this kind of stuff started to happen. And the place really started to fall apart. And so she was really the glue that was holding everything together. And within a month of her leaving, I actually laid off half the staff because I just saw everything is coming grinding to a halt here. I'm not going to have the income to actually cover all of these salaries. And so I thought, time to cut it now before it gets any worse. And I can remember just deciding around about that time that I need to unwind this business and I need to get down to Spain, because at this stage I had committed to the Spanish project, and I thought, get down to Spain and then just make that project work, because I had raised a lot of money from investors and stuff. So the importance was get down there and do that. But very much the catalyst for the decision to leave was Mia actually leaving the business. So as I've shared before, we went into 2008 in a weakened state, and then 2008 was when the crash came along. And that was really just the final blow. Like once the crash of 2008 took place, the weakened condition that the business was in just got worse and worse. And what happened in 2007, you started to notice that there was problems brewing. Things were slowing down, deals were falling over. A couple of projects that I had agreed to sell, the purchasers, they took a couple of months to kind of close the deal, and then just before the closing of the deal, they pulled out. And I can remember thinking, oh crap, like this is really getting serious now. And so if somebody, I kind of think back to myself and wonder, like, if somebody had been in my corner, if I had, like, if my father had been alive, for example, or if I had some sort of mentor that was in my corner, that was listening to the struggles that I was kind of going through, and also not just the struggles, but also your ideas. Like, I'm thinking I should expand over here, or I'm thinking I should build this separate business, or I should do this other thing. It's when you're speaking to somebody who has, nothing to benefit from it except just looking out for you. That's a super valuable relationship to have. And I kind of think to myself, had I had that person in my corner, he would have tapped me on the shoulder and said, Gavin, before you do all this stuff, are you completely clear this is what you want? Because it's quite clear to me now that the decisions I made back then were really detrimental to my future at the time, because I moved to Spain, sold everything that I could back here in Ireland, and then down in Spain everything came unraveling down there, and so I suddenly had kind of burnt my bridges, couldn't go back home, and I was stuck, and I ended up having to go to the Middle East and places like that. But anytime you're going to make a very big decision, I think you should just get clear on, is this what I want? Is the future I'm trying to build actually what I want? Not what my ego wants to be fed, but actually, think about the freedom that you enjoy right now. Do you want to lose that freedom? Do you want to have more busyness, or do you want to have less busyness? Do you want to have a bigger team or a smaller team? Think about all of that. So from 2008 to 2014, I was in an exceptionally difficult place. Like, the income went to zero, and I didn't have Mia working for me anymore. So there was no connection there for those 7 or 8 years. But as things started to improve, when I moved back to Ireland in 2015, I think it was the beginning of 2015, things started to kind of pick up again. And as things started to pick up, I can remember thinking to myself, you know what, I can feel this same urge to have somebody assisting me. And so I remember reaching out to Mia and just saying, hey, how's it going? What's up? What's happening in your life and stuff? And by that stage, she had some children, she was married and all this kind of stuff. And I just sort of said, listen, I'm starting again. It's very much from the bottom up. And I would love if you would consider coming and joining me. And so in 2016, Mia came back and actually started working for me again. And it was just me and her, my trusted assistant, helping me put things into place. And so without hesitation, she said yes. And we started the next chapter of the business. And it's so interesting just looking back at the kind of the way your life kind of goes in different paths and branches off and all this kind of stuff. So from September 2016 until May 2023, Mia was with me right through COVID. She worked with me. We had arranged actually that I didn't need an office anymore. By this stage, because she had kids and stuff, she was going to work from home, and all of the time. I used to have a meeting with her once a week, and I would go to her home and we would sit in her front. There's kind of a front room that they had, and all of my files and stuff were on shelves. And I used to go in there, I would have a folder and she would have a folder, and I would give her the folder and she would give me a new folder. And that would be how we would meet and how we would build the next sort of step of the business. And so yes, she stayed with me right up until May 2023. And in May 2023, we went our separate ways. At that stage, everything was going grand for us, but we just kind of thought, look, things are kind of changing. The world of work is changing very much in terms of remote work and all that kind of stuff. And so she was with me during those first few challenging years, and then she sort of stepped away, and I haven't been in close contact with her for the last couple of years. And I regret that now, because now she's gone. And she really was a very warm, caring, kind person, thoughtful, great work ethic. I can remember she was the fastest typist I had ever seen. I can remember I would dictate a letter to her and she would type it as I was dictating it, and she was able to keep up with the speed that I was speaking at, and just clackety clack with this keyboard. And it used to inspire me, like, what, how quick can you type? It's just insane. And so I admired a lot about Mia. I admired her quiet strength, and her devotion to her girls. And she never sought any of the limelight or any of the attention, but she quietly was working away there, functioning, and the business functioned because of her. And my coaching business has grown to what it is, very much because of all the work that Mia put in those early stages. And the most impactful thing that I think of now is legacy. And I've always been sort of big on legacy, but none of us knows how much longer we have left. And that's a very sobering thought. But it's also one that's quite liberating. It's that because you don't know when, you've really got to kind of make every day count. And, you know, you just don't know. And life is quite fragile, unfortunately. And so you have to think carefully about, are you ready? And what exactly are you going to leave behind? The impressions that you've made on the loved ones around you and the people around you, the memories that you've shared and the memories that you're leaving behind, those get carried on. And also very much in my thoughts are like, just how present were you with your kids and stuff like that during those most important years? And so Mia leaves behind two beautiful young girls, Lauren and Darcey. And it really hits me hard just saying their names, because I can remember every time I called over to Mia's house, the kids were often there. They would usually say hello. And I can remember just my own experience. I was 21 when my dad died, and it was very impactful. And I can just imagine these girls are only 12 and 15, so it's going to be difficult for them. And so my heart goes out to them, and I can only imagine what they're going through. So for all of those of you listening, I hope this episode has triggered some thoughtful reflection, and perhaps it'll be a catalyst for some positive changes that you might decide to make in your life. But anyway, those were my thoughts. Mia, thank you for everything. This episode is for you. Thank you.